Welcome to the Growth Blueprint, your ultimate destination for cultivating leadership and character growth in every aspect of life. I'm your host, Tabitha May Talib, here with my amazing co-host, Master Chris Rappold. Whether you're a teacher molding young minds, a parent shaping the future, a youth worker igniting tomorrow's leaders, or business nonprofit leader driving transformation, this podcast is tailor-made for you.
So join us on this journey as we explore the art of creating containers that foster personal and professional development through meaningful conversations. From unlocking leadership potentials to driving impactful change, we're here to help equip you with strategies, insights, and actionable steps to inspire, innovate, and lead with purpose. Get ready to build a brighter future, one sustainable strategy at a time.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Growth Blueprint. I am your co-host, Tabitha May Talib, here with the ever amazing Master Christopher Rappold. Hey Chris, how are you?
Doing great, Tabitha. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited. I mean, I feel like I always say this, but truly our guest today is really going to take us into a piece of this that we haven't really explored yet. So excited to have Kemi with us today. Hey Kemi, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, always. And y'all are going to go straight from listening to this podcast to Kemi's podcast, which I'm going to tell you about in just a second. So Kemi's a life coach, an educational consultant, and a podcast host, as I mentioned, dedicated to guiding young adults through pivotal life transitions, especially in education, career development, a master's in higher ed administration, and over 7 years of experience in post-secondary advising. Kemi empowers students and young professionals to find affordable paths to fulfilling careers. I love affordable and fulfilling together. She co-hosts the podcast, Your Advisors Will See You Now. So go check it out, where she provides insights into post-secondary options, financial literacy, and the journey of becoming a young adult. In addition to podcasting, Kemi leads workshops for high school students and homeschoolers on creating standout college applications. We can all use support in that area. I have 2 young adult children. That is a process. Also managing finances, exploring career options. She has a background in psychology and a passion for holistic guidance, which I love. Kemi's committed to helping others reach their very fullest potential. So excited to get started on this. These young adults are a passion of mine, so grateful to have your wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So if I have an opportunity, Kemi, I'd like to start out with the first question. And first of all, after listening to the introduction that Tabitha gave you, boy, your background and what you've already done in your young career is just amazing. So bravo to you, and let's keep it going. But to start out, the first question, how do you create environments that help students, especially from undeserved backgrounds, see and reach their potential in both education and in career planning?
Yeah. So when I think about the environments that I create, I guess I can kind of group them into two. So one in like my coaching, and then I'll talk about like my sessions and workshops. So what's key for me during our coaching sessions is to just ensure that I'm really actively listening. You know, by doing so and not actually listening to respond, it really does create an environment of trust and for safety. And really that's what people really need. And that's what you need also to hear what's the underground root of what is like the challenges that are like impacting their process for whether it be searching for college or even those like personal challenges that are happening. Cause sometimes we always tend to overthink those personal things that are inhibiting us from achieving those goals as well. So I always try to create that kind of trusting environment and then allowing them to just see how they can achieve their goals, kind of providing that clear path forward, asking them a lot of questions to get to the main source of how can we overcome those challenges that are popping up and how can we achieve whatever your particular goal may be. And with my session and workshops, I always like to be engaging and I always like to be very welcoming so I can captivate their attention. I remember just being young at that age and just I can't stand lecture style. Like I don't like when you're just talking to me. Like it has to be engaging. It has to be like active. So what I try to do is I try to include like different activities that will get them engaged with each other, try to get their gears flowing a bit. And then also I like to draw on some of their unique strengths as well, so it can build confidence within them for whatever kind of workshop that we're focusing on. So even with the application workshop that I actually did a couple of days ago, I like to pick on their strengths. Then I ask like little unpacking questions throughout the whole entire session. And then we go into this like brainstorm for how to curate their essay. And it was really cool seeing that, because at the end they're like, oh, I really didn't know this piece about myself, or I really didn't think that I could actually like write this. So it was really great having that kind of experience with them. And something that I always try to bring in as well whenever it has to do with like advising or career planning is just trying to prioritize like affordability and like accessibility, because we know how it's expensive. Higher education is expensive. And that's definitely one of those bigger challenges. So just making them see what other options there are in order to tackle it, or to make you have as like the least amount of debt as possible.
Yeah, you said something, and you said for one of the words I thought you were like extraordinary. I mean, the cost of college this time I have one daughter that's still in college and one that's graduated, and it's almost unbelievable. you
Mm-hmm.
know. So, as somebody that's right at that stage, I can certainly relate to that. You started out by saying something. You talked about active listening, and then something that's come up in our conversation is authenticity. It's amazing to me. We go back to the basics, Kemi, because the rapport that you create, and of course I'm telling you this, but and you know it, but the amount of rapport and connection you create when you actually listen to somebody, when you actually
Mm-hmm.
listen to what it is that they're saying, I would be willing to bet in some situations, this is the first time maybe this person is, my goodness, you're not giving me a generic answer. You're not
Mm-hmm.
hitting me with a cute little quote or something like that. I think you actually get what I'm saying. And act in intent and active listening, it's just so important. And then you said their unique strength. And if I could drill down on that one, if you ask a typical person, what are your flaws, they could go, "Bup, bup, 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 bup."
Mm-hmm.
Strength sometimes, and especially a unique strength, it's not as easy maybe for them to be aware of. How do you peel back them to understand a unique strength?
Yeah. And actually, that's the piece of coaching that I really do enjoy in like all aspects of coaching, is when you really bring, like, you actively listen, then you also bring your curiosity. Because sometimes someone will say, man, I'm just really terrible at that. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? And like, well, X, Y, and Z. I'm like, well, can you tell me a little bit more about that? You mentioned this other word. So it's always like the curiosity to unpack that. Like, what specifically do you mean by that? Because sometimes someone will be saying, like, I think I'm a failure, but it's like, no, maybe it's just you have a struggle getting up in the morning. Like, that's really what it could be, something so much smaller. I remember even talking to someone, and they had such a bad day because they were part of, it was like more of like a health goal, and they were part of this like boot camp, and they felt like they were a failure. They ended up gaining weight and all this other stuff like that. And I was like, okay, well, what triggered you today? Like, what happened today? Like, what made you like really have to reach out today and call me? And then as they're talking through me, they're like, I've been in this boot camp for like 3 weeks. I lost X amount of pounds, but I didn't sleep well last night. I didn't eat well last night, and I couldn't max out when I was lifting. It's like, oh, so you had a rough patch. Do you see your strength for the past 3 weeks? You showed up every single day. You ate correctly every single day. You had one misstep of you weren't eating correctly, and you didn't sleep. I mean, I don't even work out. So if that was my case, I'm not even showing up. You showed up, you know? You're saying you didn't even max out, but your unique strength is you are still showing up. Your
Mhm,
resilience is there. So really
mhm.
helping them to unpack that. Because sometimes when we have those glasses on, or of like, we just can't really see. We can't really see the truth. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. Perfectionism, I think, is sometimes it can be a stumbling block, and you coming along as a gentle soul and just, getting them to see, oh, Okay, so I just missed yesterday, or I had a little bit of an off day. It's not the end of the world.
Mhm.
That's a huge thing. You're an intelligent person that they trust, that's giving them a perspective that they need to hear in the moment, and that's so valuable.
I love that. And I keep thinking, I've known so many young people that have gone through this process, and it makes them, as a general rule, feel really bad about themselves, feel
Mhm.
like they're not enough in a million ways. And it's just stressful and hard. And I'm always thinking like, this is the first time as a young person, you get to decide what to do with your life. It's so exciting. And it's not, doesn't feel that way to so many young people. So I love this idea of creating this container where they can thrive, where they can be seen and heard. That's amazing. I'm curious, as we're kind of leaning this into our theme of leadership and character development, how do in your work, through your podcast and your workshops, how do you define leadership and character development? Like, what does that mean to you? What are the words you use? How does that resonate?
Yeah. So for me, I would have to say that leadership is taking small steps in meaningful ways that aligns with one's values and whatever their goal is. I think, especially when you're younger, you think that leadership means I have to be like student council president, I have to be the loudest person in the room, I have to be the jock. It's like,
Mhm.
no, that's not essentially what leadership is. And it's very important to realize how much you're going to be leading yourself once you leave high school, because you really are going to have to start actively leading yourself. You have to show up for yourself every day. You have to make clear decisions for yourself every day. And it's I like coaching and I like doing these workshops to help them get their footing on this first major decision that they have to make, because it's a big one. And it's you got to think about it in their shoes too, right? Their whole entire life has been planned out since they were young to now. Their breakfast has been planned out. Their lunch, they don't even know what they need to have for dinner because someone's already prepping it for them. They're going to the bus stop. It's taking them to school. They know their regimen, right? So taking this time and this stage to learn how to actively lead yourself in these small decisions and these small steps really builds up your confidence to start moving like on your pathway forward. And it's really important. And I think also in terms of like character development, there comes that level of resilience too, right? Because you're making these decisions and giving yourself a little grace as well, because this is new to you, this is kind of like you're trying to figure this out on your own. So just kind of developing that level of confidence and resilience through the process. I think that that's really a key part in the character development. And something that I also like about in our podcast in particular, which I really, really like, is we have these career chats where we speak to people in different careers. And something that's been very lovely is there has been like only 5 people, I think, that literally were like, I was in high school, I knew what I wanted to do, and I stuck that path. Everybody else was like, I thought I knew what I was doing. Then I went to college, and then actually I backtracked, and then I didn't end up doing this anymore. Then I'm in a totally, completely different career. So I think it shows like the humanness in all of us, and it shows that these, highlight reels of TikTok and Instagram, it's not going to be perfect, but you need to keep showing up for yourself and leading yourself every day to keep pushing forward. And don't be hard on yourself.
Wow. Yeah. Yes. I wish someone had said that exact thing to me when I was 18. Like, you can make whatever decisions you want, but the game is going to change 17,000 times in your life. So just like hold on tight and enjoy the ride a little. I'm particularly struck. I think I'm not sure anyone has ever defined leadership this way in our podcast. This idea of leadership is leading yourself. That's so profound to me. I've never heard anyone describe it that way. I'm curious if you can talk more about that.
Kemi, I have to echo what Tabitha was saying. That just, as soon as you said that, it was wow. That is just so good. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just had to
Mhm.
compliment you on that. Boy, the clarity of that. So thank you. But go right ahead.
Yeah, for sure. And I think again, it goes back to just we are just so used to kind of the way of like leadership looks like one specific type of person or it's one specific type of way that it helps us not to look back at ourselves and see what we're truly doing. And I think again, it's like as humans, we try to belittle all the things that we do. Like, oh, it's no big deal. No, it's not a big of a deal. Like, no, it actually, what you're doing is you're trying to really align yourself with your goals. Every decision that you're making is leading yourself in the direction where you want to be, whether it be career wise, if you're like, okay, I think I want in 10 years from now, I would love to have like a home. I would like to be a provider. I want to have these things. It's like, okay, what are you going to do to get into that direction? Let's start with the career. What are your interests? What are you going to do to figure that out? What are you going to do to really test yourself and see like, oh, this is really want to be. Okay, now you figured it out. Where are you going to go now? It's those initiative steps it's all the baby steps that you take in order to get to that end. And I think we always forget that because as humans we're stressing out along the ride and like we're like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? But we do need to look back and remember it took all those multiple baby steps to get where we are now. And we had to lead ourselves to do so. It wasn't by happenstance. It was all by an intentionality. So
much. I love that so much.
Kemi, what motivates you to emphasize leadership and character growth in your outreach? And what do you believe it brings to the lives of the students and families you support?
yeah, I think honestly what motivates me the most is really reflecting back on myself and working. It's always easy to reflect back on myself when I was working in the college setting because I'm seeing everybody like, man, I was just like them. Like, I didn't know there was other options to do this, or I just thought that I had to go to, a 4-year school and then I just did that route, which was fine. It worked out great for me. But I wish that I took more initiative or I knew that there was more resources provided on what my different options could be. And then having the courage and confidence to step out on those different opportunities. So I think that motivates me to have this piece of providing a resource for young adults to see that here's how you can attain your dream career. Here's how you can do it affordably. It may not look like just a straight 4-year college, or it may look that way, but here's some ways to do it affordably so you're not breaking the bank so you can still achieve those other major goals down the line if you want to get a house or a home. So that really is my key motivators I see when I work with my clients or even when I was working in college is just seeing them and myself and saying, man, I wish I would have known so much more or had someone to really partner with me to make the right decisions and clarify my thinking so much. So that really does motivate me to have the passion to help this like specific group of people.
Yeah, and I think when you bring that level of awareness to them, it opens up a whole world that they didn't see because they had their very focused blinders on if this is the path. And so I'm sure in the people that you've worked with, I have to imagine there's people that you've put them on a trajectory they never would have found if it wasn't for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And to add on to that too, I think it can empower them too. Because sometimes I think we feel as though we're stuck in this one way of doing things. But if we're able to show them like, oh no, there's other ways, and here's the information that you need, it gives them more confidence to make better decisions that align with themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm super, super curious to kind of drill this down to some like tidbits because I know we're gonna have parents of young adults. We're gonna have young adults listening. And I'm curious if you could share with us what are some of those key elements when we're thinking about really understanding our own leadership, our own character, and transitioning to this kind of like what's next phase of life? What are some of the key elements for people to be thinking about that you try to generate in your work?
Yeah, number one, it has to definitely be empathy. It has to begin with the empathy there. Empathy, and I would say structured guidance and accessibility. Again, just making sure you're listening to them, making sure that they feel supported and that they feel understood. Because I think sometimes, and this is what I've heard from parents when they talk to me, is it's like the parents obviously have the best interest for them, but sometimes it could be difficult because it's like they're also thinking back to, man, I wish I would have did this or this could put them on the straight path versus kind of like, let me hear where you're at first and let me provide you some structured guidance on that. And that's been one of a trending comment from some parents saying like, it's actually good to have you work with my child because they just need to hear it from someone else but me. So, and it's like, I was like, yeah, I definitely get that. And sometimes, when you're younger, like my parents are just saying this, like that they don't know, or it could be on the opposite end where it's like, my parents think I'm perfect and I can achieve anything, but I need some reality. So it could be on both ends. But making sure that they feel supported, that they feel understood. And then I also like to emphasize like structure through my coaching and also through like some of our sessions too, just having timelines to keep them on track. So that way they are ensuring that they're taking those steps needed to get closer and closer to their goal. because often we have these goals, but we're not creating a timeline. We're not creating like those benchmarks to see how far we are going. And if we're not seeing that, it's not going to keep us motivated and it's not going to get us closer to where we need to be. So having that structured guidance piece in there is very, very helpful. And then again, like the accessibility piece in terms of like career planning and college planning in particular, just ensuring that you're able to see and have those options that are affordable. It's just it's just so expensive nowadays to apply to school, to go to school without taking into consideration the finances that behind it. Is the career that you're going to go into, is it going to be your ROI? Like, you know, you have to balance out those thought processes, which is really hard when you're young because some people haven't paid bills or don't pay a mortgage, so they don't really know how really this is where I want to be and how to budget accordingly. So that's also a large piece, is really emphasizing the accessibility to get into their dream career.
Kemi, can we, and this is a curveball, so I apologize if I'm like throwing something at you, but wondering if we can drill down into accessibility a little bit in terms of like, maybe what are some of the real barriers that are out there that people need to consider? And then maybe are there perceived barriers that maybe get in the way of creating a plan that either aren't barriers or there are ways around them? I'm wondering if you can share some of each of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah. I think one of the largest barriers, and I think it might be time wise, I think a lot of people will wait till maybe senior year or end of junior year. You can start this process when you're a sophomore or a freshman. Just start small with trying to understand what your child is interested in and listening to them that way first. And then you can also start applying to scholarships like sophomore year as well. So still even try to apply to some of those bad boys and put them in your back pocket, even if you're not sure where you want to go yet. That's still free money. Start applying for those as well. Really digging down into, I think also sometimes people think maybe a four-year college isn't good for me because maybe I'm a more hands-on person. Like there's exploring other options where the curriculum is a better fit for you. So maybe someone is a hands-on person and maybe they want to go to a trade school. That might be a better option where 50% of your time is you're going to be in the lab and the other time is a smaller portion of you being in a lecture. So understanding what other avenues there is for you. Another barrier some people think, as well as some students have accommodations. So some students have an IEP and think, oh, I'm not really sure if I can go to different schools. No, there are schools that will partner with you and make sure that you have accommodations for whether it be test taking or because there's different things that they'll provide you based on like what your needs are. So you can check in with those schools and check in with those resources too. So there are many ways to make your dream of going to school and attaining the career. There are multiple ways to make it happen. The biggest one, yes, is the financial piece, right? My biggest recommendation, if I could go back in time, in addition to always applying for scholarships, is people don't recognize that community college, you could go there first, complete your gen eds, and then transfer to in-state public school. And essentially, you're taking class like a social studies class for a cheaper cost, or if not free, depending on your state, and transferring it into that school versus paying for the same exact class nearly and it being a higher price. So I think we also need to start working on that stereotype of like, oh, you're going to community college? It's like, yeah, I'm going to community college. I'm saving some money, and then if I wanted to go somewhere else after that, then that's fine. Or there's even some careers where you just need a certification. So there's multiple assets. There's multiple ways of doing things, or even just maybe even encouraging your child to, if they're in their senior year and you don't want to jump the gun, even encourage them to maybe dive into some internships or apprenticeships to feel some things out first. If you feel as though you're like, I don't really know if they're going to commit to this 4-year thing. I don't want them to have X amount of debt and them not even get a diploma in return. So there are multiple ways of working it depending on like your child and like your finances. And there's not one clear path. We always think just graduate, go straight into there. I know I'll accept debt, but no, don't think about it intentionally. You can make it work for you.
I love that. I mean, and I'm thinking about, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I know that there are professors that work at private colleges and then teach the exact same class. In fact, they have to remember to change the top on the syllabus. So, right, like, so that myth
Yeah.
of like it's a different level of education is like not so real. I also just want to elevate. I have been preaching, along the lines of people should get your assistance because they don't listen to me. I've been telling people forever to start thinking about it your sophomore year, because I think
Hmm.
it gives you time. It gives you the time to explore all of the many options. And there really is a path for you. There's so many interesting schools that are not the ones you think of. There are so many interesting gap years, so many
Yeah.
interesting, voc internships. So yes, start early and start thinking about it. If it's not something your parents or your guardians are into, then find someone like you or like me. I love doing this with other people's kids to help you kind of see what else is
Mhm.
out there, because there's so much great stuff. I love
Yeah.
I mean, I was really excited to hear your comment on the IEP. I'm
it.
certainly very familiar with it, having been a teacher for so many years. But to understand that colleges are very, or some colleges are, sensitive to that and can
Hmm.
create the accommodations is nice. I don't think of it in terms of, 18 and older using the
Hmm.
IEP, that's just nice to hear. So I alluded to this on my last question, but my next question is, can you share a specific moment from your coaching podcast or educational work when you witnessed the positive impact of encouraging growth and resilience in a student or family? Because like I was saying on my last question, I just I'm sure the trajectory of sometimes I believe sometimes just a nice word or a comment can shoot people off in a very positive direction. Never mind coming up and having the privilege of working with somebody as sharp as you. So I'd love to hear a story.
Yeah, for sure. One story that is like a highlight for me and kind of put me on this trajectory of like doing coaching is when I was a student advisor. I had this student, she was failing a lot of courses and kind of just getting passed on year after year. And then when I first started here, I was like, this girl already like bombed 4 classes already. What's going on here? And in the school setting, they obviously want us to meet with students, but just solely academic wise. But I literally drilled down and asked her, I was like, "What's going on?" I'm like, Do you understand?" And she was supporting herself all by herself. So she didn't have like any like parents that were gonna help her financially. And I'm telling her, I'm like, these classes that you failed, you have to pay back again. And then you have to retake it again. You're only occurring more and more and more debt to this point, and you're not getting any closer to getting your diploma. So I literally was like, talk to me straight. I really want to hear, what do you think is causing this obstacle right now? Like, we're saying that there's a lot of challenges coming up with you being able to complete the work, but a large majority of it is you're just not interested in the work. And after having like more time with her, I was supposed to spend like only like an hour with her, but like I went overtime just so I could really get to what the issue was. It was she was majoring in a major that she really honestly didn't want to do. And then after the whole conversation, she wanted to do sales. I was like, "You wanted to do sales this whole entire time?" I was like, "Well, do you know how much you're paying for how much financial aid you're taking out right now? How much your courses are costing?" I was like, "You don't necessarily even have to." The program that she was in wasn't equatable to sales. And I was like, "There's even some." I was like, "Off the record, I shouldn't be telling you. There's some training programs that you could take that will teach you how to work in sales, and then they could pay you afterwards." So I was like, "You're kind of in a financial bind right now." She was in the process of moving somewhere else. I'm like, "How about we take this time to take like a leave of absence so you can pause off of taking school for a bit, kind of refresh, get to your new location where you're moving to. But right now, also next week, let's meet together and create like a timeline for you. So that way you're not just leaving the space, like I'm gonna go on break and come back and rinse, repeat the cycle again. Let's make a timeline and some goals for you to actually put you on a path of what you want to do." So we created a plan for some like options for her for looking at different like training programs, or even maybe seeing if there was like some like certifications or something near her community college, so she could like digest that and make the best decision forward. And in the end, she ends up making the right decision for herself. She ended up leaving and going to the training program, and she was on a better path than what she was before, because the way she was failing, I was like, "You're by the time you get this degree that you're not even interested in, you're not going to have an ROI, and you're going to have
Mhm,
all this debt. And then you're probably going to switch out of here anyway." But it was nice
mhm,
to see that she actually took those steps And she was on a better trajectory after that versus being in the same cycle of that wasn't working for her. So that was a good highlight.
Yeah, that's an amazing highlight. May I ask, do you think, obviously the advice that you're giving her upsets the balance sheet for a college or university, because what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
is you're perhaps encouraging her, maybe this isn't the right thing for you. May I ask, do you feel that that piece is ignored because there's a financial detriment to it, or because, college really isn't set up for that personal one-on-one interaction where they can really get to know the student?
That's an excellent question. So when you're doing the student advisor experience, you might have like a cohort of over 250 students, and then
Yeah.
you don't have time in the day to have these meaningful one-on conversations. You're usually doing a lot of paperwork and putting out a lot of fires. And
Hmm.
that's what led me to do coaching, because I was like, I really want to have intentional time with someone to actually help them and work with them holistically, not just with what's right here, just academics, because holistically there's life happening outside. What's the best choice for them? And I think that as advisors, we are, depending on the school, you have a lot on your shoulders at that time, and you're trying to like get them in and get them out. And I didn't like that. I just didn't like operating on a means of, it's like a conveyor belt of a student coming in, coming out, trying
Hmm.
to give like generalized, okay, like, all right. It's kind of like at this point, I'm like, how are you studying? Where are you studying? Okay. Here's a formula for what you could do next. Like, no, it's more than that. It's more intentional. Like everybody is not the same. And there are pressures put on, I know for the schools, some of the schools I worked at, for, yeah, they want to retain students. Student retention is a huge thing in universities, especially right now, because since COVID, there's been some dips in attendance in colleges, in addition to the high, tuition. So that is a large pressure for some people to like, okay, and just focus unwillingly sometimes just to make sure that they're passing their classes, because it's like, well, this is the end goal. We're realizing, but they don't have that time, or maybe some advisors don't know to take a bigger step back, like what's for the true benefit of this student. And
Sure.
that's what I was kind of saying, like off the radar, like I'll have these conversations with students like, are you sure? It sounds like you want to, your alignment is here. I'm like, I'm being honest with you. I'm like, I'm not going to push you to spend money at a place that's not in alignment with you. So there
Mhm.
definitely were like conversations like that I personally had, just because I morally can't, I don't feel well pushing someone to stay here if you're failing classes and you're not going to do well and you're not going to get a career out of this. So, but yeah, that's definitely
Yeah.
something that student advisors have to work with, in juggling the majority of duties that they have to do, for sure.
Yeah, well, you're a valuable resource for sure.
That's such a
Thank you.
huge lesson. It for us and for this young adult to think about, like, rather than pushing a square peg through a round hole, which I would imagine is the goal, right? Like, how to get them past that, to just step back and
Hmm.
be like, is this even the right hole? Like let's just take a breath. I mean, that's a game changing paradigm shift, I think, for us and for students. I'm curious. That makes me really curious if you've encountered
Hmm.
situations with parents who had an agenda or
Hmm.
thoughts, and you were and in your connecting and empathizing and listening with students were like, I'm wondering if that's ever come up,
Hmm.
that tension, or yeah.
Yeah, being outside in this coaching space, not right now. I think the space is starting to shift a little bit more towards other opportunities for saving in terms of school. Being within the college space and being a student advisor, yeah, that definitely happened before. I had a student that was, they were not doing well at all. It was to a high level of fail, of like Fs. And I'm reaching out to the mother, trying to like talk to her, trying to talk to the daughter on the line, 'cause she was even showing up to class at that point. And she was kind of just checking the boxes to like make sure she's enrolled but not going to class. And it was like, there's so much money you're losing at this point. I'm like, I think to a point it's hurting me more than it's hurting you, even though like and yeah, we had to have a conversation with her mom, and I was trying to be like, here's the facts. Here's the amount of money, here's the amount of classes, like, because the parent had, what was it, the FERPA, so I could discuss all her grades with her. I was like, here are the facts. She hasn't been showing up to school. She hasn't been doing well. We've had multiple meetings on the docket, and then she faded off. I think that there's more here to unpack in terms of if this is the right fit for her. And we've had like two conversations of this on the phone of like me like saying like, hey, I think that there needs to be a pause here because now we're at the point where even her degree, whatever what it was at the time, was not a return of her investment at that point for whenever she was going to graduate. She was technically supposed to graduate like a year and a half ago. And unfortunately, the mom, she still didn't budge. She still didn't budge. She was still trying to find different ways of trying to finance it, even when she wasn't able to even take out any more financial aid. So it's really just a sad thing, you know, to try to really get some people to see um, what their actions are like causing them. And this was like a very extreme case. And that was honestly like one of the, I think the toughest cases I've ever seen. And they didn't, become like enlightened with that. They still wanted to go through. I left that university at that point. So I'm honestly not sure if she's still there. I should probably hit someone up and say, like, is she still over there? Just because I'm curious now. But those situations are very sad. I think that a good alternative, like if I was in the student's shoes, would be to have like a plan of if I don't want to do this major, if I don't want to school, like at least have a plan. Cause I think some parents can respect more if there's some kind of plan versus it's like, okay, I want to take this year off, do an internship, I want to work, and then figure out if, maybe I want to return to school for this or see if there's another interest of mine. I think it's better to have some plan than no plan at all. So I wish that I was trying to get her there to kind of come up with that plan, but she wasn't showing up to any meetings, and it was just really difficult situation. But that's my kind of advice for maybe students out there that have a parent that says, "I want you to go to medical school or something," and it's not your jam. At least try to propose some other options so it seems like you have a plan. They just want your parents really want to ensure that you're making moves, that you're not just going to chill on the couch all day. So just come up with some other alternative plans and say, like, here's my timeline, here's my goals, here's what I'm going to do. Because if they see you active, I think they're going to be more of a respecter of that and in tune for like, oh, okay, like they do mean business.
I think, one of the things I keep taking away from your stories is just this idea that there are so many paths. And as we develop our authentic selves and our authentic leaderships and we lead ourselves, trying to find our path versus like, I think about like when I was 5 and I thought my like career options were like doctor, fireman, or Disney princess. Like I thought those were my
Right.
alternatives. And then the older you get, you're like, oh, there's a person who like is in charge of like very like random things. Who knew that was even a job? And so, you know,
hmm
even as this first step into our lives, just being like, there are lots of paths, which one feels right, and getting some guidance. I love when y'all get a chance to listen to the podcast. I love you interview people in fields and talk about like, what is this really like? And even reading through your podcast episodes, I'm like, that's a thing someone does. So I love that. And I guess like we're running out of time, but I'm curious if you could just kind of in closing, is there anything else we should be thinking about or just have on our radar in terms of building these containers for our young adults to really find their own path, their authentic path that's really going to serve them well? Any last words of advice?
Yeah, I feel here's my little advice. Don't overpressure them as much. I feel it's so hard because we've all been there. It's like, all right, you're 18, make your life decision now. That's pretty scary. And we always think that we have to make the right decision. So I think it always goes back to like having that empathy, having that supporting ear, saying, like, how can I support you during this time? What are some things that we should be thinking about right now to get you feeling more prepared? What are your thoughts about the future? Have you had any thoughts about the future? Well, what are some of your interests? So also leading with curiosity as well to show that's another way to show support in that way as well. And then help guiding them based off of what their answers are.
Oh, cool. Well, Kimmy, I want to thank you for sharing your time and the depth of experience you have in this particular area. We've not had somebody on our podcast that has this type of a background that where you're niched in, and I think it's just so valuable. I took a lot away from it, and I'm sure our listeners did as well. It's people like you sharing your experience that allows, the valuable nature of this work to spread. I know we see the value in bringing this work to light. My hope is that more conversations like this happen so that we can take the topics of what you're talking about and character and leadership. And, with me, it was always reading, writing, arithmetic. But as matter of fact as that, I'm hoping, this podcast starts to bring character and leadership as just as paramount as those. So on
Mhm.
behalf of myself and my partner, Tabitha May Talib, thank you for listening. We invite people who have joined in to please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Please share the Growth Blueprint podcast with others. This will help us to continue to attract high-level thinkers like Kemi on the topic of leadership and building culture. I promise you we'll continue to do our best to make sure each and every episode is packed with inspiration, strategies, and actionable steps you can take to improve your container. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on our next podcast.